I want you to picture a scenario. It's a scenario that I think basically every single person listening to this has been through at least once.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You walk into a room, and maybe it's a classroom or maybe a coffee shop or even just a regular meeting at work, and you see them.
The catalyst.
Right, the catalyst. And suddenly your brain just performs an illegal operation and completely shuts down.
Just a total blue screen of death.
Exactly. Your mouth goes dry, your palms get sweaty, you completely forget how to do basic human things like walk without tripping over your own feet.
Or form a coherent sentence.
Yeah. You have this simultaneous urge to just run away screaming, but also to, I don't know, perform a cartwheel right there just to get their attention.
It's a total system failure. Because your nervous system is just getting flooded with norepinephrine and dopamine, and you are basically incapacitated by your own biology.
It is the absolute worst.
And the best.
And the best, yeah. It's those butterflies, that really awkward giddiness. And what's wild to me is that it really doesn't matter if you're, say, 13 years old passing a folded-up note in algebra class, or if you're 35 and just staring at a, notification on an Instagram story.
The underlying feeling is identical.
We all know what it is. We are, of course, talking about having a crush.
Which is such a universal human experience. But what we're doing today for this deep dive, and what I think is actually going to surprise a lot of people, is looking at the word itself.
Yeah.
Because if you actually stop for a second and look at the word crush, it's a really weird choice for a feeling that's supposed to be about, affection and cute longing.
That is exactly what jumped out at me when I was reading through the research for today. We have this great article from Source 13. And it's titled, Why Do We Call It a Crush?
Right.
And it unpacks the whole etymology and the cultural history here. And the central mystery, our mission for today, is just so glaring when you think about it.
It's a massive linguistic contradiction.
I mean, think about the word. If I tell you I'm going to crush a soda can, or crush a bug on the sidewalk, or crush a rebellion.
You're talking about violence.
I'm talking about total destruction.
Yeah.
I'm talking about squashing something with so much force that it's completely unrecognizable.
Yeah, you're applying intense physical force until something fundamentally breaks.
So how on earth did a word that literally means to obliterate become our universal, adorable term for puppy love?
It makes no sense on the surface.
Right. So we are going to trace this word from violent destruction all the way to the heart eyes emoji.
And honestly, the journey is bizarre. It involves medieval French knights, some very questionable 19th century slang, and this highly specific type of aggressive flirting that I am personally very glad we left in the Victorian era.
Okay, I can't wait to get into that.
But
before we go back in history, I do want to ground us in the present for a minute.
Sure.
Because the Source 13 article makes a really good point right up front. Even though the word has all this heavy baggage, the modern definition we use today is actually very specific. It's not just a synonym for love.
No, it is distinctly different from love. If we look at the modern Merriam-Webster definition, a crush is defined as an intense and usually passing infatuation.
Passing, that's the key word there, right?
Exactly. Passing implies a shelf life.
Yeah, it's not permanent.
Right. A crush isn't necessarily a lifelong commitment. It's a burst of energy. It's volatile. And the source describes the symptoms so perfectly. It's that cocktail of excitement, longing, and this is a really important part, motivation.
Oh my gosh, the self-improvement kick.
Yeah.
I love this part of the article. It's that sudden, almost manic energy where you just decide, okay, if I just go to the gym 5 days a week and buy a whole new wardrobe.
And learn to play the acoustic guitar by Tuesday.
Yes. If I do all that, they will finally notice me.
It acts as a catalyst for self-improvement, but it's entirely rooted in anxiety. You're trying to optimize yourself to be worthy of this person who, let's be honest, you usually barely even know.
You're projecting so much onto them. It's total chaos in your brain. But that brings me right back to my main grapple with this whole topic.
The word itself.
Yeah. Why use such a heavy, violent word for something that feels so fluttery and anxious? Yeah. I mean, infatuation sounds very scientific. Yearning sounds poetic and romantic.
And crush sounds like a hydraulic press.
Exactly. It sounds like an industrial machinery.
Well, to understand that, we have to look at the actual DNA of the word. We have to go way back to the 14th century. And as is the case with about 30% of the English language, we have to look at the French.
Okay, set the scene for me. We're in the 1300s. What exactly are we dealing with here?
We're dealing with the old French verb croiser. Now, I want you to imagine a medieval battlefield or maybe a really dense, dark forest. Quasser did not mean to casually like someone.
I'm guessing not.
It meant to smash or break something, but specifically, and this is key, with a loud noise.
Noise, like what kind of noise?
Think of the sound of dry wood violently snapping under a heavy boot, or the sound of metal armor actually crunching from a blow.
Oh, wow.
That gnashing, cracking, horrible sound, that was Crusher.
That is so visceral. So there is absolutely zero romance in the original root.
None whatsoever. It was entirely about destruction and sound. And when the word migrated into the English language in the 14th century, it kept that violent core completely intact.
So it just meant to break things.
Right. For hundreds of years, to crush meant compression, destruction, and breaking.
Like crushing grapes for wine. Or crushing an enemy army on the field.
Exactly that. And interestingly, by the 1500s, the definition did start to expand just a little bit to describe social situations, but it still was not romantic at all. It was used to describe people crowding together.
Oh, wait, like when you say a crush of bodies.
Right. If you're at a packed concert today or jammed into a subway car during morning rush hour, you are literally in a crush. It's claustrophobic, it's about immense physical pressure and a total lack of space.
Okay, I get that, but I'm struggling to see the bridge here to the romantic meaning. We're in the 1500s, the 1600s, even rolling into the 1700s.
Yeah.
If I walked up to a woman in a tavern in, say, 1750 and told her I had a crush on her, what happens?
She'd probably scream and call the constable.
Right. Because I'm threatening her.
Because in that specific historical context, you're basically telling her you intend to physically compress her body until she breaks.
Which, generally speaking, is not a fantastic pickup line.
I definitely wouldn't recommend it.
So we have this massive historical gap. We have centuries where crush strictly means a bad, violent thing. When does the flip actually happen? Because words don't just completely reverse their meaning overnight without a really good reason.
They don't. And the timeline the source provides suggests the real turning point is the late 19th century, specifically the 1880s. And this is where the story gets really colorful because it involves a completely different slang word that essentially acted as the bridge.
Yes. This was the part of the research that totally threw me for a loop. We have to talk about the word mash.
We really do.
And just so we're entirely clear here, because my brain immediately went straight to mashed potatoes. We aren't talking about food, right?
Not at all. We're talking about mash as a piece of late 19th century American slang. It was incredibly popular in the 1870s and the 1880s.
So paint the picture for us. Who is using this word, and what does it actually mean in that context?
In that era, if you had an intense infatuation with someone, or if someone was the specific object of your affection, they were your mash. And the physical act of flirting with them, that was called mashing.
I'm going out mashing. That just sounds ridiculous to say out loud.
Yeah. It sounds totally absurd to our modern ears, but it had a very specific, somewhat dark connotation initially. By 1875, there was a well-known cultural archetype called the masher.
The masher. It sounds like a professional wrestling villain.
A little bit, yeah. But in reality, a masher was usually this well-dressed man, kind of a dandy, who would loiter on street corners or hang around in theaters, and he would make these bold, aggressive, and very often unwelcome passes at women.
So he was a creep.
Essentially, yes. A flirtatious pest.
Right.
But language is really slippery. Even though the masher started as this predatory, annoying figure, by the time we get to the 1880s, the term mash started to soften up in the culture.
It lost its edge.
It lost that aggressive edge and just became the trendy, everyday slang for someone you like. You might hear a college student in that decade say, "He is my best mash," or "I have a really big mash on her."
Okay, so mash is the go-to word for romance in the 1880s. People are literally writing mash notes instead of love letters. But I'm still stuck on the mechanics of how we get from mash to crush. I mean, they rhyme, sort of, if you squint, but is that really the whole connection?
It's a lot more than just the rhyme. There's a fascinating theory by the etymologist Eric Partridge that connects the dots for us here. He suggests that mash and crush are phonetically similar. They both end in that soft sh sound. But more importantly, think about the literal physical action.
Mashing potatoes, crushing a can.
Right. They're both about pressing. They're both about applying downward force to fundamentally change the shape of something.
Oh, okay. I see exactly where you're going with this. So mash was already established as the slang for flirting and liking someone.
Yes.
And crush describes a very similar physical action of pressing. So crush just kind of naturally stepped in as a synonym for mash.
That's the theory. Partridge calls crush a snappier cousin to mash. It sounds a bit sharper, a bit more intense on the tongue. So it likely started being used interchangeably in the street slang of the day to describe that exact feeling of being pressed or overwhelmed by a romantic emotion.
That makes total sense. It's exactly like how we cycle through slang today. Like, first something is cool, then it gets old, so it's rad, then it's lit, then it's fire.
Exactly.
One word just gets tired and overused, so the culture grabs a slightly different, similar word to spice it up again.
Precisely. And in this specific case, crush just had that extra layer of intensity that people liked. Mash feels a bit soft, a bit mushy, literally.
Right.
But crush feels sudden, it feels hard. And once crush took hold in the lexicon and people started using it, mash just slowly faded away into obscurity.
Which honestly is probably for the best. Telling someone, hey, I have a huge mash on you just sounds like a culinary
It
disaster.
really doesn't have the same romantic ring to it at all.
So that's the prevailing theory of how it happened. But I want to see the actual proof. Do we have a smoking gun in the historical record? Like a specific moment where we see crush appear in the wild as a romantic turn for the very first time?
We actually do, and it is delightfully specific. The etymologist found the exact shift moving from oral street slang into the written record. It's in the personal journal of a young woman named Isabella Maud Rittenhouse.
Isabella Maud Rittenhouse. I love that. Even her name sounds like it completely belongs in a period drama.
She was a very real person living in Cairo, Illinois, and she kept this incredibly detailed diary of her life. And there's a specific entry from the year 1884 where she's writing about her friend, Winty.
Okay, let's hear the quote.
She writes, Winty is weeping because her crush is gone.
Winty is weeping because her crush is gone. Now, hold on a second. In that specific sentence, the word crush refers to the person, right? The actual guy she liked left town.
Yes, that's a great catch. In this very early usage, the crush was the physical object of the affection. The person was the crush. Just like a few years prior, you would say, he's my mash.
That's so interesting. So you wouldn't say, I have a crush. You'd point at someone and say, he is my crush.
Correct. But the grammar of it evolves very quickly. Language moves incredibly fast in this era with the rise of print. So by the 1890s, writers started using the word to describe the feeling itself rather than just the person you liked.
So it shifts from being the noun, the person, to the internal experience you're having.
Right. And we see this shift clearly documented in a book called Yale Yarns by John Seymour Wood, which was published in 1895. He writes a line describing a burgeoning romance, and he says, it was a crush, you see, on both sides.
Oh, a mutual crush.
A mutual crush. And that specific quote from Yale Yarns is historically significant because it shows the word had fully arrived in the culture. It was being used in published literature to describe a shared emotional and romantic dynamic. It wasn't just disposable street slang anymore, it was print-worthy.
That is a remarkably fast evolution. I mean, we go from literally breaking armor and bones in the 1500s to a creepy guy in a corner in the 1870s to mutual affection in literature in 1895.
It really is a sprint.
But here is the big question I'm left with, and this is something the Source 13 article touches on really beautifully towards the end. Why did it stick around?
What do you mean by that?
Well, slang dies all the time, right? Nobody goes around saying they're matching anymore.
True.
Nobody really says they're keen on someone in that same vintage way. So why is crush still the absolute default word nearly 150 years later?
Yeah.
Have we really just not found a better word for it?
I think it all comes back to that central paradox we started with. The violence of the word crush isn't a bug in the language. It's actually a feature.
You think we intuitively like that it sounds violent?
I think we need it to sound violent. Think about what a real crush actually feels like in your body. Real intense infatuation. It isn't a gentle thing. It isn't a slow, comfortable burn. It hits you like a freight train out of nowhere.
That's very true. It's incredibly heavy.
It's pressure. The article actually puts it perfectly. A crush can feel like your heart is literally being squished under a ton of emotions. Oh, absolutely. Especially when it's unrequited love. It literally feels like a physical weight pressing down on your chest.
Right. Crush captures that all-consuming chaos. It perfectly mirrors the pressure implied in the literal physical definition of the word.
Yeah.
If we just called it a flutter, it wouldn't capture the anxiety of it. If we called it a liking, it wouldn't capture the sheer intensity. Crush captures the actual impact.
It validates the suffering.
Exactly.
It's almost like you're saying, hey, this hurts right now because my heart is actively being crushed. It acknowledges that liking someone that much is actually kind of a painful experience.
It gives the emotion the semantic weight it deserves. And because it does that so well, it has become such a massive structural part of our culture.
Yeah.
I mean, the article calls having a crush a rite of passage, almost like losing your first baby tooth. You literally cannot get through human adolescence without having a crush.
It's the driving plot of basically every teen movie ever made. The source mentions Flipped and To All the Boys I've Loved Before, but you could list 1,000 of them. To All the Boys is such a great example to bring up here because the entire premise of that story is about the secrecy and the internal pressure of the feeling. The protagonist, Lara Jean, writes these incredibly intense letters to her crushes just to release the feeling from her brain, but she never actually sends them. She keeps them hidden in a hat box.
Right, because if she actually sent them, the crush would become real life. It would either turn into a painful rejection or a real relationship. The crush only exists in that fragile middle ground.
Exactly. The crush is the safe space of fantasy. And before we had teen movies, it was magazine quizzes. You know, does he like you back? Decoding his body language. We have literally spent a century obsessed with decoding this one specific feeling.
And now, obviously, the medium is totally digital. We aren't sitting around writing in leather-bound journals like Isabel Maud Rittenhouse did. We're sliding into DMs. We're analyzing exactly how many minutes it took them to view our story.
But the core feeling is completely identical. Whether it is a handwritten note passed in a classroom in 1884 or a heart reaction to a photo online in 2024, the underlying psychological state is the same. And the word crush still fits it perfectly.
It's funny, the article mentions that despite all this digital evolution, the word manages to keep this playful, childlike charm.
It does.
It really is just a silly bit of slang. Like, even as fully grown adults, looking at someone and saying, I have a crush, makes you feel a little bit like a stuttering teenager again.
It does, and there's a psychological reason for that. It actively lowers our defenses. It allows us to admit to a feeling that is actually quite vulnerable to say out loud. Admitting you are in love with someone is incredibly high stakes. That's serious, terrifying adult stuff. But admitting you just have a crush, that's playful. It's significantly safer.
That's a really great point. It acts as a safety valve word. It acknowledges the intensity of your feelings without demanding the commitment of real love. You can have a crush on a celebrity, or the barista at the coffee shop, or a coworker, and it's just fine. It's harmless.
And every single time we use it, it connects us directly to that bizarre history. Every time you say the word, you are unknowingly referencing a 14th century French verb for smashing armor, filtered through 19th century American street slang for aggressive flirting.
Which is just so cool to think about. It really makes you realize how wonderfully messy human language is.
Language is incredibly fluid. It just takes what it needs from the culture. We desperately needed a word for that heavy, chest-compressing feeling of sudden infatuation, and we just stole a word from the battlefield to get it.
And it worked.
It worked flawlessly.
So what does this all mean for us today? You know, besides the fact that I'm going to be very, very self-conscious the next time I use the word in a sentence.
I think it ultimately serves as a reminder that our internal lives are incredibly complex. We so often think of emotions as a simple binary, you know, happy or sad, soft or hard. But the history of the word crush proves that our most tender, vulnerable feelings can be perfectly described by words with incredibly rough, violent histories. It reminds us that love, especially in its very early stages, is a kind of collision.
A collision. I really like that framing. It's not a soft, graceful landing. It's a crash.
Exactly. It completely disrupts your status quo.
Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating look at a word that I use probably way too often. We've gone from medieval battlefields in France to Victorian street corners to modern Netflix rom-coms.
It is quite the historical trajectory for one little syllable.
And it really makes you look at your everyday vocabulary a little differently.
It certainly does.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. The research today spent a lot of time discussing the MASH era of the 1880s.
Right, the snappier cousin.
Yeah. And it just makes you wonder about the linguistic road not taken. If MASH hadn't faded out of the slang, if crush hadn't stepped in at the perfect moment to replace it, would we be sending MASH notes instead of love letters today? Would the movie be called To All the Boys I've Mashed Before?
That sounds absolutely terrifying to me. I don't think I would watch that movie at all.
No, it sounds like a weird horror film involving rude vegetables.
But it also makes you wonder, what other aggressive, completely violent words are we using today that might, in 100 years or so soften into total terms of endearment.
Maybe in the year 2124, telling someone you want to destroy them will be the ultimate romantic compliment.
Honestly, who knows? Language is wild and unpredictable. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.